Yeah, hi everyone, Jason here, Robot Lawnmowers Australia. Today's video we're going to just have a good discussion just around to the Segway Navimows. Going to give you my opinion on exactly how these guys are going now after all the testing we've done with it, and basically sort of try and give you a bit of information to let you know whether it's something that you should buy or shouldn't buy. So just a quick background is that we've been testing the Segway Navimow for probably just over 2 years now. So we've actually been sort of pretty much testing them since the inception, since the very first machine was released. And back in the sort of very first test models, we were suitably impressed by the machines when they very first landed. But we soon found out that with those very early models that come out, is that they had their limitations. And they were basically in line with what we thought they'd be, where we couldn't get the robot to mow very close to walls and under trees and things like that. So it was very much in line with how we expected an RTK mower to work. However, over the last 2 years, Segway have really put some effort into sort of updating their navigation system and getting these guys to be able to navigate close to walls and under trees and things like that. And they've really done a great job. So what I'll do is I'll sort of just start from the start, basically from a quick basically when you're unboxing it through to setup and everything else, and we'll just sort of run through pros and cons that way. Basically, when you get the robot, you unbox it, everything's in the box. There's nothing that you need that's not in the box, unless you need to mount your antenna remotely from the base station. So that's your base station here, and the wire that comes out of that base station is only very short. In fact, I've got an antenna here. So this is one of the RTK antennas for Segway, and that is how long the antenna cable is. So you can only plug it into the back of the base station and put it up on top of a pole that goes right beside it. So if that's not suitable for your property, and we won't get into anything to do with how RTK works in this video, because I'll do a far more in-depth video shortly for all RTK mowers and give you an idea of sort of how RTK actually works. But with that antenna, what you can do is you can buy a 10-meter extension cable for the antenna, like such. And then that can extend it 10 meters away from the base station, and you can join 2, 3, even up to 5 of these. I've never tested 5, 3 is as much as we've looked at, but you can move it 30, 40 meters away from the antenna, from the base station. You can put that antenna up on the house, up high where it needs to be. But like I said, I'm not going to get into how RTK works in this one. We'll do that another time. So basically, everything comes in the box. All your power supply, base station, robot. There's nothing you need afterwards, except if you want to mount that antenna cable further away. Setting these guys up is really good, because that brings me to the app. Now, the Segway app, or the Segway Navimow app, really is really good. It's actually a fairly rock solid little app. It functions really well, straightforward, explains to you everything you need to do along the way. I really can't fault the app. The only thing I can fault it for is not a fault, but it's annoying at times, is that it does force you to watch videos in the beginning before you can move on to the next stage. But honestly, that really is a good thing, because most people are probably going to be a bit gun-ho and go and do things that they shouldn't do, or map it in places they shouldn't map it. So having that sort of video tutorial along each step as you go through the app is really good, because it really does allow anyone who knows next to nothing about these things to install it first time straight away without any problems at all. So after you've sort of mapped out your map and everything else through the app, and you've got the actual robot up and running, the way the robot operates itself, really fantastic. Obviously it mows up and down in lines and keeps absolutely perfect parallel lines no matter wherever it goes. What these robots actually do is they travel up to the end of the line, they then turn around, then they sort of reverse back, and they sort of, almost like a bit of a parallel park, they reverse back in to line themselves up for the next path, and then they go straight for the next path. So even at the very borders, you end up with nice straight lines all the way to the end. The robot doesn't dig up your grass. The front wheels turn really easily on the front of the robot, so it spins itself around sort of this way very easily. Okay. So yeah, once it's up and running, mowing perfectly straight lines, It'll mow for as long as it can for its battery life, which is, I think it's 3 hours for the 800, 4 hours for the 1500, and 4 hours for the 3000 that it can actually mow for. Then it goes back to the base station, charges again, and it heads back out and picks up where it left off and continues to mow. So on that front, they really do a great job. So which I suppose brings me into basically just how accurate the navigation system actually is. Now, like I said before, I've done a lot of testing on these guys now. We've been testing for years. We've tested under trees, under buildings, all those sorts of things that you can, that it can and can't do. And what we've really found is that under tree cover, not really much of a problem. The rule of thumb we've found is that if you can see blue sky through the tree, just dots and bits of blue sky around the place through the tree, so the tree canopy is not super thick, then generally you'll have no troubles at all with these guys navigating under your trees. If that canopy is thick and you really can't see through it at all, then these guys will probably stop 1 or 2 meters, maybe 3 meters in underneath the tree canopy. They'll stop working, but again, that really depends on the location of your RTK antenna. And again, we're not going to talk about that in this one because that's a far more in-depth conversation. So yeah, look, tree coverage, we've really found that most normal tree coverage is not generally that thick. It's generally not too bad. The one thing we found that really does trip these guys up, and this again is all RTK mowers, not just Segway Navimow, is that if you have 2 very tall walls, I might put a little picture up here actually for you, 2 very tall walls where basically the RTK signal, where the satellite signal really can't get to the mower from all directions. It's only getting at just a little bit of, a few satellites that are in front of it, a few satellites that are in back and behind it, but mostly it can't actually see very many satellites. That's where basically all RTK robots really start pulling up stumps and can't navigate very well. It generally only seems to occur between sort of very tall buildings, so generally it's 2-story buildings on each side. But if it's a narrow pathway that's less than 4 meters wide, then smaller fences can definitely affect it, and houses and things like that. So it really comes down to basically understanding how RTK really works. And again, won't get into it now, but if you've got any questions on that, just give us a buzz or send us photos of your property, and then we can give you some really good information on whether it will actually work or not, or whether we think it will work or not, because we're not magicians. We can't tell you exactly perfectly if it's going to work or not. So that's the navigation, really does work well. Like I said, we've had these robots working within 15 centimeters of 6-8 meter tall walls, no problems at all. We've had them working under tree canopies, had them working under really thick tree canopies with the RTK antenna, making sure that we've got every single satellite covered from the robot, from the robot to the satellite, and from the same satellites back to the RTK. So we've been able to really push the limits of these guys and get them working really well in conditions that they really shouldn't work. I was even able to get the 800, this guy here, I was able to get this guy here to travel from my front yard down a very steep slope, through a fence, through a gate, around the side of the house, through a narrow space, 2-story house, under tree coverage at the same time, into my backyard and start mowing. I wasn't able to get it to mow in my backyard because I really do have a lot of buildings and tree coverage, and I'll take another video on that another day to show you exactly how that went. But just having it being able to navigate its way from my front yard to the backyard, and I really am talking about significant challenges for RTK. It's a 2-story house within 2 meters of a 2-story house, basically through a gate that's 2 meters wide, which was colour-bond fence, and beside another fence which was 2 meters high, and under tree coverage at the same time. So they really do a great job. They've really exceeded any expectations I had on what they can and can't do when it comes to navigating through areas that RTK generally shouldn't work. So that's the navigation. I love it. I'm probably sounding like a bit of a Segway Navimow fanboy right now, but that's sort of not the case. I'm basically just trying to let people know that these guys have progressed a lot in the last 2 years, and their positioning system I think might be the best. I haven't really done enough comparisons between what we've got at the moment, between all the RTK robots we've got, but if it's not the best, it's certainly equivalent to the best as far as its navigation abilities and its ability to maintain its position and know where it is. I'll move on to, essentially, I suppose it's not a negative as such, because honestly these are two-wheel drive machines, but slopes. So basically these guys will go up and down slopes, no problems whatsoever, but when they're trying to turn around on slopes, they are not the best machine on the market. But like I said, two-wheel drive machine, you really can't expect that much out of them. I mean, nearly all the robots behind me that are two-wheel drive, none of them really perform much better than what the Segway does when they're trying to turn around on slopes. But because these guys mow in lines, yeah, they're always turning around somewhere at each end, so it's a matter of how you set the robot up for where it's turning around on the slopes. That will sort of dictate whether the robot actually does have to turn around on a sloped area. So even on a slopes on the side, so if you've got a slope heading downhill here and the side path here, even coming across this way and turning around to go back across the slope, the turning around ability, it generally tends to sort of slide down the hill a bit, that will correct itself. To Segway's credit, they nearly always recover from that situation. They nearly always find another way. You watch them and it's incredibly frustrating at times, because you think if you just turn to the left to be fine, but what they'll do is they'll actually abort mission at some point and they'll actually do an arc around in a bigger circle and then come back and reverse into the spot where they need to start again and go again. So really, really clever how they sort of think about what they're doing, and when they can't do it, they find another way to do it. So I've always been very impressed, and Segway have done that right from the start, actually, where the software has sort of been able to try and work itself out and try different options to try and get itself out of trouble. So yeah, so look, that sort of leads me probably to the next one, which is a really good positive on the Segway. As far as I know, these are the only robots that I've actually got so far, only wireless robots I've got so far, that they actually remember an obstacle that they've come across. So if they do find an obstacle in the middle of the lawn, hopefully they'll navigate around it. But if they don't and they get stuck in say it's a hole, they get stuck in a hole. I'll throw a picture up here of actually what happened here on one of our test ones. Where it fell in a hole, it got stuck. Fine, it's a big hole. I would expect a robot to get stuck in a hole like that. But what I found afterwards is, after I freed the robot and got it out, it actually stopped and it went around that hole the next time it came back. So there's no way of sensing the hole at the time, because it was this robot here. I think it was actually the 3000, but it was a newer version of the 3000 that has the ultrasonic on the front, but not the vision fence. We'll get into those two things in a second. But yeah, look, it remembered its location where the problem was and it went around it. I've also had another one where we've mapped the robot too close to the boundary, and then when it's gone around the boundary, it's hit the fence, but it remembered to hit the fence. So the next time I went around the boundary, it actually didn't hit the fence in that spot anymore. So that's something that really I haven't seen in any other robot, whereas these guys, they do remember the obstacles that they come across. I don't necessarily know how long they hold that memory for, and what they do. I imagine that when they go out for the next session, they probably start from scratch again, but during that session, they don't get stuck in the same spot twice, basically. So big thumbs up to Segway for that one, because that's something that really surprised me when it actually happened. We'll move on to these sensors on the front here. So once again, back when they were first released 2 years ago, the 3000 square meter model, this one here, so this actually is one of the oldest ones we have here at the moment. So this 3000 square meter model, it came with the ultrasonic sensor on the front. That option it's not available in Australia. I don't think it's available anymore anywhere else in the world, but they've gone away from the ultrasonic sensor, and in its position there is now what they've called the vision fence, which is a camera system, a camera-based AI system that now obviously sees things in front of the robot. Now in Australia, so forget what you're sort of looking at the front here, because this is an 800 square meter model, which doesn't have anything on it, but that's because, again, we've had this prior to the Australian release. The 800 square meter model, the 1500 and the 3000, they all come with the vision fence here in Australia automatically. So it's not an option, you can't even buy it as an option in Australia. It automatically comes with the robot no matter what. So yeah, so back in the early days they had the ultrasonic, and they've since moved on. Now the ultrasonic worked quite well. It saw things like most ultrasonics do, 20-25 centimeters in front of the robot, and it would go around things no problems at all. If it was a small obstacle, it'd go straight over the top, no problems. Because most of these ultrasonics don't generally see anything that's taller than somewhere around 10-12 centimeters high. They've since gone to the vision fence. Now the vision fence, like I said, is an AI-driven camera system. and it obviously identifies things, and over time, as they get their database built up over the next 10 years, they'll actually see, they'll be able to identify just about anything in your yard. Segway being Segway, if you do a bit of research, you'll see they've been into autonomous robots for a long time, so they already have a massive database of information when it comes to camera vision, which they've obviously implemented into Segway, because that camera sort of picks up exactly what it should. It sees things like leaves and things on the ground, will go straight over the top, no problems. Also identifies what it should go over and what it shouldn't. You put a hose in front of it, it stops. The leftovers from your dog, it sees and goes around, all that sorts of things. So I wouldn't say it's probably going to be exactly 100%, but it's certainly 99% foolproof just about, because it really does see things really well. When you approach the robot, it sees you as you're approaching it and then decides what it's going to do. So very safe for the kids and the dogs and things like that, because the camera is going to not only identify that something's there, it's going to identify what it is that's there, and then obviously make its own decision on whether it continues to mow, or whether it just stops its blades and keeps going and then starts its blades again, or whether it stops and goes around altogether. So really, on the safety front, the vision fence is fantastic. And then back on that safety front again, these guys have got a blade halt system on as well. So if you touch this side of the robot where the blade actually is on top, the blade system stops, which again, they really are a really safe robot when it comes to that side of things. So with that, the blade system itself, I'm not quite sure how dirty this one is. I'm sure it's quite dirty because all these robots have been out working quite hard. The blade system, again, really good. We haven't found that it builds up. These have not been cleaned underneath more than just a brush out. So they don't build up with grass. It all seems to fall away, no problems at all. The Segway uses both sides of the blade on it, so it spins clockwise when it starts, and the next time it starts it spins anti-clockwise. So you don't have to worry about flipping your blades or anything like that. It'll wear both sides of the blades down, so your blades will last longer, which that's a big debate out there. I typically don't change my blades till at least somewhere between 12 and 24 weeks. In that ballpark, but look, some people like to change their blades every 10 weeks, every 5 weeks. Some people don't change them at all. But yeah, look, I generally think that changing your blades once or twice a year is generally enough, depending on what sort of grass you're actually mowing. Everything else in these guys, 2 front wheels. We've had no issues with any of the hardware on any of these robots, which I think is probably fantastic in itself. We've had no switching issues, we've had no motor issues, no board issues, just nothing. They've been absolutely flawless all the way through. They come with, obviously, so the Segway Navimow has hub motors, so the actual drive motors are inside the hub around there. Now that does lead me to one negative that they've got at the moment, and hopefully it'll fix, or I don't think they can fix it perfectly, but they can certainly help, and I'm not sure where the software is at the moment. But because when these robots are turned off, you can see these wheels completely free run. They can spin very easily. So if the robot stops and turns itself off while it's pointing downhill or pointing uphill, it rolls to the bottom. Now, if that's a steep hill, obviously it can get quite some speed up before it gets to the bottom. But I really, with the hub motors, there really needs to be something done to ensure that when these robots do stop and the battery turns off, or the robot turns off, that something that they turn themselves sideways, hopefully 90 degrees to the slope, which I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, because it could already be done. It could already be doing that, because I haven't actually tested that for some time. It's probably been sort of 4 months since I've actually tested these on a slope to see how they actually operate and how they stop. But prior to that, this particular model here, this 3000 that I had on my front lawn at some point, it did roll down the hill quite a few times with the firmware that was on that. So then basically we'll go to firmware updates just from that, because back in the early days, Segway was releasing firmware updates quite regularly, probably 2 a month, even more. Now it's back to 1 a month, and generally it's a large update 1 month and then a small update the next month as it goes on. That generally seems to be how it seems to be going. But they are absolutely 100% updating their firmware all the time and making things better and better and better, and adding more functionality to the app. Now, like I said before, the app, I really think out of all of the wireless models, the app for Segway is definitely the best app in how it works and how you map things, just basically everything about it. It just flows a lot easily, There's no time delay between doing things on the app and the robot. It works really, really well. Being able to remote control the robots around, it's got 2 joysticks on the screen, so you can remote control it very, very easily and very accurately and quite quickly. You can get it to go around your yard quite quick, so you can map areas very quick as well. The functionality of the mapping and how it's mapped, again, fantastic. These guys have got unlimited mapping abilities on them, so you can have as many areas as you want, as many pathways as you want. Honestly, I think that's fantastic for a domestic robot, because obviously a lot of people, particularly in the small malls, a lot of people have got up to 5, 6 small lawns in their property. They've got, you know, basically a nature strip on both sides of their driveway. They've got a front yard on both sides of their driveway, and then a backyard that might be separated by another path and a fence or a pool, whatever it might be. So it's quite easy in Australian yards to get up to 6 areas, whereas a lot of the other wireless robots have limitations on the smaller versions. That only have a few areas that you can map. So keep an eye out for that limitation on robots to make sure that you can actually map the areas that you need in your yard. So these guys, unlimited. The actual area that they mow, I'm not sure that's limited either, but obviously with the amount of battery charge you can get out of these guys, you should really stick to obviously what their maximum capacity is, which is 800, 1500 and 3000. Back on the firmware again, or sort of basically between software, is right now these robots, you can't map from one area to another to make it mow one area at a different time. You actually have to let it mow everything one area after the other. But that's changing, and that's absolutely, I've been guaranteed that is changing, and it should be changing in the September update for the firmware. So once we get that September update, we should have the ability to be able to send these robots out to any area at any time on any day for any time limit that you want, which gives you the complete flexibility to be able to to send the robot out and mow individual areas, and that's the same for mowing on different angles. Currently they automatically change angles every time they go out, so it goes out, it might mow north-south when it goes out this time, next time it goes out east-west, then it might be a 45-degree angle after that and 45 the other way, which is great, absolutely fantastic if you don't want to think about it and you just want to set things up and let it run. But in a lot of cases, there's going to be a lot of people out there that actually want to set the angle that it mows on, because it might be a really long, narrow path. So that, again, I believe is coming in the September update. So all these things, that really is that update is the only thing that actually, to me, is the only negative to these robots at this point in time, and it's about to be fixed. So as soon as that update comes out, I really think these, well, probably for domestic yards, and probably back again, comes down to the slope of your yard. If you've got a reasonably flat yard, then I truly do believe these are probably the best residential wireless robot you can put on your yard at the moment, particularly in the RTK versions. So if you've got a yard that RTK is just not suitable for, well, then these are not going to work for you. But if you do, then these really are really great at navigating tight spaces. Like I said, they've got really good navigation abilities. Well, when under trees and near houses and things like that, they're really, really, really good. So, like I said, once we get this firmware update where we can mow different areas at different times, I think these guys really are going to be, the best mower, the best RTK-based residential mower on the market. They just must be used, with minimal slopes. So they'll be able to go up and down slopes, right up to around that 25-degree mark. So 40-45%, no problems at all going up and down that slope. But when it's turning on the slope at the moment, I'd say something along the lines of 15 to 20% at best is what you really want to limit these guys to. And that's simply because of the traction on a two-wheel drive robot. And like I said, nearly all two-wheel drive robots are very, very similar. I'll just touch on the lighting system on here. You can see this guy here has got the red light around the top here, and also the base station is showing a red light. Now, the indications on here actually tell you what type of signal the actual robot's receiving and what the errors are with the robot at the time. I find it incredibly helpful when you're mapping. The best thing about it is this light is green when you're green or blue. I think I've forgotten here. It's blue, so it's solid blue when you're mapping. But if you start getting into an area where it's getting less and less GPS signal, the blue light starts flashing. So you actually see if you're getting into a position where the robot's actually going to struggle to see. and you can see the map creating live on your app as you go, and you can see whether if the line is nice and straight on your map, it's generally got a pretty good signal. When it starts flashing, you'll start seeing the line that you're drawing. It starts getting a little bit wavy, a little bit crinkly, and if you really get into a position where there's almost no GPS signal, that line will start jumping all over the place, and you can see. Which goes on to the next one is that you can reverse your map, which is fantastic. There's an erase button. So as you're mapping, if you don't like what you've done, hold the erase button, and the robot itself reverses back by itself back to a point that you're happy with, and then you continue on. So if you are mapping in an area that's got not great RTK signal or satellite signal, you can see on your map when it's getting bad. You can see on the robot when it's getting bad, and you can just reverse up and do it slower. Do it again until it gets right. So that ability is fantastic. Editing maps as well. You can, after the map's already made, you can edit the map by driving to a location, clicking on the app where you want the map editing to start. The robot drives there by itself. You then drive the robot to where you want the new map, the new border to be, and as soon as that robot crosses the border somewhere else on the map, it automatically takes that as the junction point, and then either deletes the section you want deleted or adds the section you want added. Perfect. It really does work great. The app is fantastic for Segway Navimow. Okay guys, I forgot one thing to explain to you, and that was about connectivity and security. And I actually was reminded by this robot actually going into alarm out of its geofence, because this one is actually geofenced to my home property, and I'm here at the shop obviously, and after it turned itself on and charged itself properly, the alarm went off. So connectivity for a start. The Segway Navimows have all three. They have your Bluetooth connection and your 4G connection and a Wi-Fi connection if you need it. So you've basically got the best of all three worlds. I think every robot should have all three sets of connectivity, and these guys do. So you've always got connectivity to the robot, no matter where the robot actually is. So when it's at home, it can be connected through the Wi-Fi, no problems, or you can just leave it on its 4G connection, on the LTE connection I should say. And your app will always be connected to that robot, so if it alerts or anything, push notifications. Segway Navimow has push notifications. So as soon as anything goes wrong with the robot, it gets stuck, it gets lifted, the alarm goes off, anything happens, it sends you a notification to your phone, and it pops up on your phone and tells you what's going on. Of course you can turn those off if you don't want that to happen, but you've got the option to have those notifications sent to you when the robot does its thing, when it finishes mowing, all that sort of stuff. It can send you a notification. And like I said, more importantly is the security on it. So you geofence these guys to your property. Once it goes outside the boundary, and I've tested it, and it's around about sort of, I'm not quite sure whether it's time driven or distance driven. I suspect it's distance, but I've put this back in the back of my car yesterday or the day before it was when I brought it here, and I managed to get about 150 metres down the road before the alarm went off. Now, I don't think I was outside of the zone for very long, so I think it was distance driven. So once it got about 150 metres outside its mowing area, the alarm went off in the back of my car. As you heard a second ago, it's reasonably loud. It probably sounded a lot louder here because we're inside. It's quiet. It's night time now, so it's very quiet. So it probably sounded a lot louder. I think the alarm is loud enough that you should just about notice it, but it's not going to wake your neighbours up, honestly, unless it's in the middle of the night. It's just enough to alert the people nearby and hopefully inside the house the alarm's gone off. But there's also a very good chance that it's probably going to be a bit further away from your property by the time the alarm goes off. Anyway, so the alarm, one thing, yes, it alerts you, makes noise, all that sort of stuff. But more importantly is that on the app it has the ability, and I'll throw a picture up here right now, but it has the ability to tell you where it is. Now this image on the screen right now shows that this robot is at our shop and it's outside of its geofence. So it basically, when it goes outside the geofence, the alarm goes off. It stays going off. It doesn't turn off for a long time, and I actually don't know how long that is because I didn't wait that long. It was so annoying in the back of my car that I had to pull over after about 3 or 4 minutes and come and put the pin code in to turn it off. So turning it off is simple. Pin code on the robot turns off the alarm, no problems at all. If you don't put the pin code in, the alarm just sort of keeps going. I assume it will turn off because it will obviously flatten the battery quicker if it stays going, but the alarm goes off for a long time. After that, as per the picture there, you can look on the app, you can see where the robot is. So obviously you can go and get it. You can also sound the robot, and I'll just play this now and I'll keep quiet for a second, but you can actually tell the robot to make a noise. It's not a really loud noise again, but it's enough that if you're nearby looking for the robot, you'll be able to hear it. So yeah, basically, if you are looking for the robot, just say the robot happens to have got caught in some bushes somewhere in your property, you actually can go on the app there and just make a noise so you can find it. If it's at somebody's property because they've stolen it, you can stand at the front door and press that button and you'll be able to hear the robot beeping inside the house or whatever it might be. So security wise, fantastic. You can't turn the robot off unless you put the pin code in, so if the person doesn't know the pin code, they can't turn the robot off. Now, the only downside is that this guy here, the 800 square meter model, its battery from fully charged, when I took it from the house and brought it here, it only lasted about 24 to 36 hours before it went completely flat and the robot turned off. And that's a 5 amp hour battery, or a 5.1 I think it is, whereas up to the 3000 has a 10 amp hour battery and a 7.4 I think it is in the 1500. So you've probably only got basically between 1 and maybe 3 days max of battery life in these robots before they will go completely flat, and then you won't be able to track them after that anyway. Okay, but you'll still see where it was last located. So that's sort of it. I just want to add that into the video before I go. I'll flick it back to the video now, and thanks for watching. So I think that's most of it, guys. I'm trying not to sound like a fanboy, but look, I really do think that these guys work really, really well. And like I said, for residential lawns up to 3,000 square meters, I really think these guys are absolutely fantastic. It's pure and simply the slopes that put all two-wheel drive robots to the side of it. But if you've got a reasonably flat yard with reasonably open views of the sky, with tree coverage that's not too thick, then there's a very good chance that something like the Segway Navimow is going to be great for you. If you have any sort of doubts on whether RTK-based robots are actually going to be okay for your yard, and you live in Australia obviously, because that's where we are, so we service all over Australia, but not overseas. So, but if you are looking at Segway Navimow or other RTK robots, and you want to have more information about whether we think it's going to be suitable for your yard, take a video, take some photos of the area, the ground, the sky, show us everything you possibly can. Send it through to us via email, and we can have a look at it and just let you know whether we think the Segway Navimow is going to be okay for you, or whether we just think, look, no, you probably need to stick to a wired robot or something else that's coming out in the future. So that's sort of that. Contact, again, always, guys, sales@robotlawnmowers.com.au. Email us if you've got any questions whatsoever. You can find us on our website. Just go to www.robotlawnmowers.com.au. Heaps of information on there. We've got lots of information on all the brands that we sell. And look, you can also catch us on all the socials, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, those sorts of things. You can catch us up with little bits and pieces. Just search for Robot Lawnmowers Australia. Thanks for watching.